The Reconstruction era, spanning from 1865 to 1877, represents one of the most critical and complex periods in American history. It arose from the devastating aftermath of the Civil War, tasked with the monumental challenge of rebuilding the South, restoring the Union, and addressing the newly emancipated millions of African Americans who had been freed from slavery. Reconstruction sought to redefine the social, political, and economic fabric of the United States, but its causes and consequences remain deeply contested topics, permeated by conflict, hope, setbacks, and lasting repercussions. The root cause of Reconstruction was the profound devastation wrought by the Civil War, which not only destroyed much of the Southern infrastructure but also fractured the nation's very identity and constitutional order. The defeat of the Confederacy called into question the status of former slave states, as well as the rights, status, and freedoms of millions of newly freed African Americans. Emancipation had ended slavery's legal existence, but left unresolved fundamental issues of citizenship, equality, and economic independence. The federal government faced the unprecedented task of integrating these newly freed people into American political and social life, while simultaneously healing the bitter sectional divisions that had nearly torn the nation apart. Moreover, the war's enormous destruction in the South required economic recovery and the establishment of a new labor system to replace slavery's absence. Politically, Reconstruction aimed to reintegrate the rebellious Southern states and ensure the civil rights of freedmen. Early efforts under Presidents Lincoln and Johnson emphasized rapid restoration with limited conditions. But congressional Republicans soon asserted a more transformative agenda: radical Reconstruction through military oversight and constitutional amendments. The 13th abolishing slavery, the 14th guaranteeing citizenship and equal protection, and the 15th securing voting rights regardless of race, sought to remake Southern society and protect African American rights. These measures expanded federal authority and challenged traditional notions of state sovereignty in ways that deeply polarized the nation. Socially, Reconstruction was a period of significant but fragile progress for African Americans. Freedmen built churches, schools, and political organizations, and many participated in government for the first time. However, white Southern resistance was fierce and often violent. Groups such as the Ku Klux Klan and vigilante organizations used intimidation, terror, and violence to undermine black political power and restore white supremacy. This period exposed the deep racial fault lines in American society and the limitations of legal reforms without societal acceptance. Economically, the South grappled with rebuilding an economy shattered by war and the abolition of slavery. Sharecropping and tenant farming emerged as dominant systems, often trapping African Americans and poor whites in cycles of debt and poverty. The failure to redistribute land denied many freed people economic independence and perpetuated entrenched inequalities. Meanwhile, Northern capital and industrial investment slowly diversified the Southern economy, though it remained largely agrarian and underdeveloped compared to the North. The consequences of Reconstruction were vast and enduring. While it temporarily extended political rights and reshaped the Southern political landscape, its premature end in 1877 led to the rise of the Jim Crow era, institutionalizing racial segregation and disenfranchisement that would last a century. Reconstruction's legacies resonate in ongoing struggles over civil rights, federal authority, racial justice, and the meaning of American democracy. In essence, Reconstruction was a pivotal experiment in democracy and racial equality, met with both remarkable achievements and profound failures. Its causes, rooted in war, emancipation, and the quest for justice translated into consequences that profoundly influenced the trajectory of the United States, illuminating both its aspirations and contradictions. Political Reconstruction and federal control. Reconstruction initially sought to reunify the nation and redefine governance after the Confederacy's defeat. President Andrew Johnson's early policies aimed for a swift restoration with lenient terms, leading Confederate states to enact restrictive black codes that aimed to rebuild racial hierarchies despite emancipation. In response, radical Republicans in Congress took control, passing the Reconstruction Acts of 1867, which divided the South into military districts and required states to ratify the 14th Amendment and protect black male suffrage before readmission to the Union. This marked a radical expansion of federal authority over states, challenging traditional state sovereignty and introducing lasting constitutional shifts. Notably, the 13th Amendment abolished slavery, the 14th granted citizenship and equal protection, and the 15th protected voting rights regardless of race. African Americans seized new opportunities, electing black legislators and officials during Reconstruction governments, a transformative but temporary political revolution in the South. Reconstruction also provoked fierce resistance. White Southern Democrats and vigilante groups like the Ku Klux Klan sought to restore white supremacy via intimidation and violence, undermining African American civil rights and political participation. These political struggles defined Reconstruction's volatile character and the tenuous nature of its gains. Social transformation and racial struggles. Socially, Reconstruction was a time of both hope and backlash for African Americans. The Freedmen's Bureau and new public education initiatives fostered black literacy and civic engagement. Churches and fraternal organizations became centers of social life and political activism. Freedmen sought to reunify families and claim legal rights long denied. Yet, African Americans faced pervasive racial violence and discrimination. White supremacist campaigns aimed to enforce segregation and reverse civil rights advancements. The contested meanings of freedom and citizenship revealed entrenched social divisions, and despite constitutional protections, the struggle for racial justice prolonged well beyond Reconstruction's formal end. Economic challenges and developments. The Southern economy, devastated by wartime destruction and the abolition of slavery, underwent profound restructuring. The plantation system collapsed, giving way to sharecropping and tenant farming, the dominant post-war labor systems. These arrangements often trapped black and poor white farmers in cycles of poverty and dependency. Meanwhile, Northern capital poured into Southern infrastructure, particularly railroads and industry, slowly modernizing parts of the economy but leaving much of the South agrarian and underdeveloped. Land reform was a controversial failure. Promises of redistributed land were rarely fulfilled, limiting economic independence among freed people. The end of Reconstruction and its legacy. Reconstruction effectively ended in 1877 as part of the Compromise of 1877, which resolved the disputed 1876 presidential election. Federal troops withdrew from the South, ending military enforcement of Reconstruction policies. This ushered in the Jim Crow era, characterized by segregation, disenfranchisement, and institutionalized racial discrimination lasting into the mid-20th century. Despite its premature conclusion, Reconstruction's legacy is profound. It redefined the nation's constitutional and political framework, extended citizenship and voting rights to African Americans, and catalyzed long-term social and economic transformations. Importantly, Reconstruction remains a key reference point in American struggles over race equality and federalism. Key political figures of Reconstruction, biographies and impact. Abraham Lincoln, 1809-1865. Lincoln's leadership throughout the Civil War set the stage for Reconstruction. Known for his commitment to preserving the Union and ending slavery, Lincoln introduced the 10% Plan, proposing a lenient approach to restoring Southern states if 10% of voters pledged loyalty. His assassination in 1865 curtailed his influence, but his vision tempered reconciliation with abolition. Andrew Johnson, 1808-1875. Johnson's policies favored rapid restoration with lenient terms. However, his approach allowed former Confederates to regain power and tolerate the restrictive black codes. His vetoes of civil rights legislation triggered fierce opposition by radical Republicans and led to his impeachment. Thaddeus Stevens, 1792-1868. Stevens, a radical Republican leader in Congress, fiercely advocated racial equality and harsh Reconstruction policies, including a land redistribution. He pushed for the 14th and 15th Amendments in federal enforcement of civil rights, aiming to prevent the restoration of former slaveholders' power. Charles Sumner, 1811-1874. A leading abolitionist and radical Republican, Sumner championed citizenship and suffrage for African Americans and federal intervention to protect civil rights, helping draft key constitutional amendments. Ulysses S. Grant, 1822-1885. Union general turned president, Grant supported enforcement of civil rights laws and battled white supremacist violence through legislation like the Enforcement Acts. His administration marked Reconstruction's federal enforcement peak. Jefferson Davis, 1808-1889. Former Confederate President Davis symbolized Southern resistance to Reconstruction, advocating Southern autonomy and opposing federal reforms designed to dismantle slavery's legacy. Hiram Rhodes Revels, 1827-1901, the first black U.S. senator. Revels symbolized African American political gains and advocated racial reconciliation during Reconstruction. Blanche Kelso Bruce, 1841-1898. Bruce was the first African American to serve a full Senate term and championed civil rights and equal protection amidst persistent racial hostility. These figures embody the competing visions and challenges of Reconstruction, shaping this era's profound but often turbulent legacy in American history.